This is a reading of Headless Horsepower, The Ghost of Hollow Highway. Written and narrated by Mark Steven Nordlund. Copyright 2025, Mark Steven Nordlund. All rights reserved. A Boohouse Books book. BoohouseBooks.com. Ian Crane dumped another box of small pumpkin keychains onto his desk. The white pizzazzy box read, DiscountBulkPartyFavors.com. From outdated to outstanding. The soft rubber toys piled beside a Dell desktop computer. He discarded the box beside 4 others in the corner of his tech-savvy classroom. The hectic bustle of 8th-hour passing period continued through his open door. Shoes squeaked and voices boomed. Ian was tall and lanky. His strong nose hooked under a large forehead and receding hairline. Attractive blue eyes and a soothing, smoky voice added to his appealing height, making him a target for young eyes looking for trouble. Often, some of the female teachers took part as well. But Ian wasn't an easy catch. His focus, attention, and regard was placed elsewhere. Body by body, teens began entering his room and taking their seats. Chairs scraped against linoleum and book bags struck against artificial wood. Ian sat on the edge of his desk as inaudible conversations chattered. The deafening bell finally sounded, ending the transfer of students. The date was October 31st, and the holiday showed spiritedly, not by the decor of the room, but by the attire of the room's young inhabitants. The conversation softened. Ian began his lesson. "Where did we end yesterday?" he asked. "I honestly have no damn idea where we left off." By default, he spoke to his students like fellow adults. He had an easier time reaching them if they felt like equals. That is, until they stepped out of line. One student answered, "You were comparing your ex-wife to Lady Macbeth in all the ways your ex was worse?" Crane lifted his arm and pointed at the student. "I'm thrilled you remember that, but no, that was Wednesday. Anyone else?" He tossed a keychain to the teenager, grabbing another. The skinny kid smiled and squeezed the toy. A small LED flashlight bulb illuminated brightly behind its jack-o'-lantern face. "Antoine Lavoisier," another student shouted over the mumbling voices. Crane lifted the keychain. "Who said that?" The voices were becoming irritating. "Guys, put a sock in it. It's social studies time. I understand that Britney Spears and Timberlake are dating and the tragedy you must all be going through. But keep your feelings at home. It's time to learn." The chatter silenced as a girl raised her hand from the far left of the classroom. She smiled behind black lipstick and over-applied eye makeup. She wore a black translucent top that prominently showed the color of the flesh it covered. Positioned over her large breasts, 2 smiling jack-o'-lanterns were printed on the shirt and bounced as her chest swayed. Crane drew back his arm to toss her the keychain, but paused at the sight of her festive yet inappropriate ensemble. "Seriously, Tiff?" he judged. Her smile became wider as he observed her. "What would Principal Miller say if he saw you dressed like that?" She shrugged, intentionally making her chest wobble. "He did see me dressed like this. He just stared," she said proudly. Crane shook his head. "Tiff, the entire school can see your—" He scowled at the indiscriminating teen, holding back the impulse to convey amusement. "Pumpkins," he finished. She smiled again. "Can you see them?" she asked coyly. The teacher huffed, shifted the subject, and tossed her the keychain. "That's for your answer, not for the étalage provoquant," he said. Ian stood and began writing on the large dry erase board. "Tiffany's right. We were talking about Antoine Lavoisier." "What did Antoine do?" Another voice announced. "He was executed?" "He certainly was," Crane replied. "What else?" He finished writing the subject's name on the board. "He was a scientist," another voice rang. Crane turned away from the board and distributed 2 more prizes. "A chemist, to be exact, but not only a chemist, He's considered to be the father of modern chemistry and the basis for the beginning of the chemical revolution in the 18th century. He's known for his discovery of oxygen's role in combustion and one of the first chemists to identify hydrogen as an element. Ian grinned. If you're interested in a more detailed breakdown of his work, you can consult Miss Garcia in the science wing. My knowledge ends at history. Why was he executed? A student asked. Great question. He swayed his head from side to side, generalizing. In a nutshell, you could say he was the victim of the French Revolution and its attack on advancement at the time. Societies like the Academy of the Sciences were dismantled and abolished. Many educators and academics were condemned for their practices. More specifically, Lavoisier was also tied up in tobacco scandals that withheld taxes from France. For that reason directly, he was executed by guillotine in Paris on May 8th of 1794. Crane looked out onto the sea of disinterested expressions. Raw monotonous festered within the entirety of the room. Crane smirked. Pretty boring reason to die, isn't it? He asked. Several heads nodded in agreement. Don't worry, it gets more exciting, he promised. The teacher grabbed another keychain and played catch with himself as he spoke. Lavoisier took the sentence of execution as an opportunity. If he had to die by beheadal, he was going to get some use out of it. He stopped tossing the toy and clicked the bulb on and off in his hand. Lavoisier had a scientific question that he pondered over for years. How long could the human head retain life and consciousness after its separation from the body? Color returned to the students' faces as they shifted in their seats, listening intensely. Ian continued. Before his execution, he asked a fellow scientist by the name of Joseph Louis Lagrange to observe his severed head after the executioner dropped the guillotine blade. When the moment arrived, he did. Ian paused, letting the tension build and the suspense grow on his students' faces. Antoine Lavoisier's eyes blinked 9 times and over the course of 15 seconds after his presumed death. Evidently, the brain can still remain active, even after you've lost your head. The class erupted with voices and laughter as the kids shortly discussed the historical experiment. What would that feel like? One student asked. Ask Lavoisier, Crane answered. Hands rose as he took questions and distributed keychains. Can you think clearly for that 15 seconds, or is it like being high? One kid asked. Ask your biology teacher, Crane replied. Can you still get an erection when you're headless? Another inquired. Ask your health teacher, Crane returned. One student raised a long, muscular arm. The football offensive lineman had a blonde buzz cut and displayed a snarky, troublesome grin. Crane called on him and readied a keychain. Can your head feel the pain if your body gets kicked in the nads? He asked. Ian withheld the toy. Formulate your question in a more appropriate manner, Kyle, he requested. Kyle sharply motioned to another student. Jake asked a boner question. All he said was nads, he barked. Jake said erection. That's the appropriate term, Crane snapped. Kyle rolled his eyes. I'm just asking because I want one of those pumpkin flashlights, he admitted. I participated. Give it here. The student opened his hand and demanded with his expression. Ian shook the keychain beside a stern, brick-walled stare. You can have one when you say testicles. Repeat after me, he instructed. Can a disconnected head feel pain when applied to the testicles? He enunciated. Waving a dismissive hand, the jock abandoned the interaction altogether. Fucking balls, man, forget it, he growled. Just because you had to be a teacher doesn't mean you can shit on the ones who are actually going to make something of ourselves. Crane didn't appreciate the cursing or the insults either. He slipped the keychain into his pocket and glared at the student with heavy belligerence. It didn't happen often, but when a student showed this level of defiance, he wished his job wasn't on the line. Fire burned behind Ian's eyes. Mr. Crane? A girl from the front row chimed. He turned his attention away from the mouthy football player. If the French Revolution sought to rid the country of educational advancement, what good did Lavoisier think he was doing with the blinking experiment? Science and study was basically outlawed, So why did he think any record of the experiment's results would survive the years to come? Very good, Trish, he praised. He spoke to the entire class. Because Antoine believed in a future where facts, evidence, and results dictate our existence, not superstitions, age-old traditions, or fear. He knew that he existed during a time where the latter still held power, but hoped that one day things would change. Hopefully it began sooner than he had wished. He glanced back at Trish. And we know that his results were recorded and survived, because we're here talking about it in this classroom today. Tricia smiled as her instructor returned to his desk and sat. And look where we are now, he commended. We use everything Lavoisier taught to bring us greater technology, medicines, a better understanding of the world we live in. 100 years ago, Americans believed that a bird flying down your chimney meant someone in your family was going to die, and the motor car was said to be an insult to God's creation of the horse. Just 3 years ago, everyone was in a panic about Y2K, and gas prices were at their highest in decades because of fuel hoarding. Today, we're in the best economic state of the century and stand only years away from ditching fossil fuels and powering our cars with cleaner, more reliable sources of energy. Prime examples of fear's hindrance of progress, he claimed. Is that why you drive a mini hybrid Zero? Kyle taunted. Several students laughed. As a matter of fact, it is, Kyle, Crane affirmed. The Zero happens to be the most fuel-efficient vehicle to date and leaves the smallest carbon footprint of any car released this year. Kyle sneered. It's a pussy-mobile. More laughter. Ian let the ridicule roll off. He stood his ground with confidence. Pussy-mobile can refer to one of two concepts. One, that the driver lacks social integrity and masculinity. That one, Kyle spat. And two, Crane continued, that the driver gets a great deal of female attention and receives an overabundance of... He glanced in Tiffany's direction for only a millisecond. Pumpkins. Laughter erupted again. A student in the third row raised his hand and spoke. Isn't the hybrid Zero prone to problems like battery failure and fuel leakage? Another chimed in. Yeah, I heard that one of the models was recalled for power steering failure and braking system issues. Ian sighed and threw his hands out in defense. With every new technology comes issues, tweaks, and evolution. It's a necessary evil that goes hand in hand with learning and refinement. He lifted a finger, driving the following point. I will tell you this, however. When I'm at the pump on Sunday filling my 10-gallon tank next to Kyle and his 20-gallon 78 Chevy, I'll go an entire month before I need to fuel up again, and Kyle will be back bleeding money by Wednesday. Several students grinned in satisfaction with their teacher's claim. Kyle huffed and shook his head. The debate was laid to rest with expense and efficiency as the determining factors. The lesson proceeded with key points regarding the French Revolution and its influence on the history of Western Europe. By the end of the hour, the bell sounded and the entire class packed their bags, jumped to their feet, and crowded out of the room. The thrill of Halloween night showed energetically in the haste of the class's departure. Ian shrieked over the shuffle. Don't forget to study Chapter 13 and take good notes. Tuesday's test will be open notebook. Think of it as cheating and get every answer right. Unexpectedly, Tiffany approached him as he cleared the erase board. Mr. Crane? She asked. She kept her pumpkins at a favorable viewing distance. What's up? He replied. Scorn for her wardrobe still scratched in his voice. What does étalage provocant mean? Her eyes sparkled with an immature desire. Crane raised his eyebrows and spoke firmly. It means wear a bra and a less revealing shirt, Tiff. Miller may have chosen not to say anything to you, but if Miss Deacon, Miss Harbury, or Miss Ellis saw you dressed like that, you'd be suspended until you were old enough to vote. He nodded in conclusion of his warning. Tiffany grimaced and sighed through her nose. She gave up on her attempt at coercement, turned on her knee-high boot, and headed for the door. Embarrassment burned her alive as she stepped into the traffic of the hall. Ian called out to her as she disappeared. Have a safe Halloween. She did not respond. Ian stood alone in the teacher's lounge as the buses collected bodies outside the wide window and growled out of the lot. He brewed a pot of regular coffee and tapped a pen against the counter as he waited for steam. As he impatiently tapped, the lounge door swung open. A short, attractive brunette in a Minnie Mouse skirt and ears clicked into the room. She smiled widely upon seeing him. A colorful tote bag hung from her shoulder. "Ian," she said, startled. She approached the fridge, pulled it open, and removed a nylon lunch bag. "Coffee, huh? I don't know if anyone told you, but it's after 3. Anyone with a life is going home to family and handing candy out to strangers," she chaffed. "You're right," he replied. "Anyone with a life," he emphasized. "Not me, Kate. Holidays are the best time to catch up on lesson plans. No one in the building means peace and quiet, and peace and quiet means more work completed without distractions." Kate slapped the fridge closed and shouldered the bag. "Come on, Ian, it's Halloween. Do something fun," she encouraged. "Go to a bar party, visit relatives, see a scary movie. Go to a local cemetery, paint a pentagram on a headstone, and sacrifice a stray dog. Anything's better than lesson plans." "I enjoy lesson plans," he squeaked. "It makes me feel as though I'm soothing the path ahead, preparing for what's to come, making the next 6 weeks an easier road. I encourage other educators to do the same." Kate examined his face as he spoke. Her eyes sparkled with a mature desire. She caught herself staring and corrected her expression. "Lonnie and I are going to a singles mixer in Harlan Heights. Why don't you come with us? You and I can pretend to be a couple and laugh at all the loveless losers," she offered. A smile warmed his face. "Nah, I couldn't. The flirty, intoxicated party scene isn't for me. Thanks for the offer, but I wouldn't be caught dead among those weirdos." She punched him playfully in the arm. "Gee, thanks," she yelled with mild offense. "You know what I mean," he growled. "And honestly, I hate Halloween. It reinforces superstition and promotes old, outdated ideas leading to trouble. The fear of ghosts and vampires used to run entire governments. Now it seems we keep them around just for the sake of fun. Out with the old and in with the new," he proclaimed. Katie peeked into his busy eyes for a few more seconds before ignoring his silly gripes and changed the subject. "What did you choose to hand out to your kids?" she asked. "I'm sure you were outraged when Miller mandated we supply non-edible treats to students to make sure they all showed up to school today." Interrupting the moment, the coffee machine began spitting water as a dark, grainy syrup poured into the pot. The sharp odor of burning ground seeped from the overused device. "Oh, for shit's sake," Crane cursed. He yanked the pot from the steel and dumped it into the nearby sink. He angrily eyed the outdated coffee machine. "What is this thing, like 20 years old? My Keurig never craps out on me at home, and its coffee doesn't taste like raw sewage." He sighed and began the brewing process over again. He calmed and addressed Kate's previous question. I handed out little pumpkin keychains. The kids seemed to like them. Got them in a steel, 10 cents apiece from Discount Bulk Party Favors." He replaced the pot and met eyes with Kate. "You?" She grinned, reached into her tote, and pulled out a small plush black cat holding a mini dry erase board in its paws. She displayed the stuffed kitten just below her nose and made it dance for him with her fingers. Crane snickered through his nostrils. "Cute," he remarked. $3 apiece from Craft Cafe," she announced. "Damn," he growled. "You must really love your kids. You won't see me paying no $3 a pop for those delinquents." "All teachers love their kids, Ian. Even you," she spat. "And I know your kids love you back because of the way they talk about you." He jested. "My kids talk about me? Now I hate them even more." Outside, the last bus shut its doors and groaned out of the lot. Silence loomed in the halls, and the time crept up on 3:30. Kate drew a marker from her bag, scratched a note into her cat's miniature board, and placed it beside Ian's coffee mug. "Don't stay here too late," she said sweetly. "And be careful driving home. There's some kind of arsonist setting fires in Sleepy Hollow and the surrounding villages." "Yeah, I heard about that," he said. "Stupid kids." She placed her hand on his arm and spoke quietly and earnestly. Happy Halloween, Ian. Happy Halloween, he repeated. Kate's bright red costume heels tapped across the tile as she departed from the teacher's lounge. She started down the quiet hall. The coffee machine finished its pot of raw sewage and steamed to a stop. Crane took the cat from beside his mug and read her note. "Call me sometime, will ya?" was written in red ink with a little smiling heart. He chuckled, left the cat on the counter, filled his mug, and began his night. He chose not to mention it to Kate, but dating after a divorce was another scene he would only attend as a corpse. Ian spent the next 6 hours at his classroom desk. His room was the only space in the building that emitted light. Every hour, a security guard would pass by and wave. Crane graded papers, entered scores, and arranged the next 6 weeks of lesson planning. He completed every task he consistently overheard other teachers complaining about, having no time to finish at the end of every quarter. To him, the work was exhilarating. Even more so was the fact that while other educators were out partying, he was prepping for an easier and more efficient year than any teacher on staff. He beamed with self-regard. Crane finished, closed his books, and gathered his things. He doused the lights, waved to the guard, and felt the cold chill of the parking lot. He took the long walk to his car through the brisk October air. The gunpowder gray Mini Hybrid Zero was slender and compact. The new vehicle looked like a shining trophy under the tall lights and faded glow of the moon. A bag on each shoulder and keys dangling from his teeth, Ian noticed one of Kate's cats on the roof of his car, above the driver's side door. The black stuffed feline proudly displayed the words "Pussymobile" on its shiny white board. Crane grunted angrily, snatched the keys from his mouth, and unlocked his door. He tossed his belongings onto the back seat, took the cat into his hand, and scoffed at its message. "Damn kids," he mumbled. His impulse told him to discard the cat on the street. But what was the point of a fuel-efficient vehicle if he was just going to litter the earth with trash? He vexingly threw the cat on his front passenger seat and dropped his body behind the wheel. Home was a good 45-minute drive from work, and on most days, especially nights, he never spotted another vehicle until his apartment complex lot. He didn't mind. The isolating commute gave him valuable time to think, plan, and come up with new and better ways to reach his students. The historical guillotine blinking experiment he had used today seemed to do the trick. Through the rest of the lesson, his students paid decent interest to the drudgery of the French Revolution and its somewhat dull details. Crane backed out of his space, left the lot, and carefully crawled onto the blackness of Maryview Parkway, headed for the expressway. Out of all of New York's scattered highways, Old Albany Post was one of the longest and definitely the darkest. Street lamps were spaced 40 yards apart, and the stretch was surrounded by rolling hills, small-town municipalities, and sprawling forests, earning it the nickname Hollow Highway. Also contributing to the name, the 4-lane freeway ended at his residential home of Sleepy Hollow. He would hit 4 stoplights before the Old Albany ramp, and on most late nights, he would be infuriatingly forced to brake at every single one of them. The same luck seemed to frown on him tonight. First 2 lights, both red. He switched on the radio to distract himself from spiraling into unnecessary anger. Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne boomed in his small cabin. He grudgingly changed the station. Each channel played a popular hit as he disdainfully shuffled through them all. He stopped at an oldie station. The lulling eeriness of Hotel California by the Eagles made him smile. Evidently, Crane's out with the old and in with the new philosophy didn't necessarily apply to everything. The light turned green as he rolled forward. The song ended and a news report commenced. The voice spoke rapidly and intensely. "Another gas station, this time in the southwestern corner of Colonial Park, has been hit by the Sleepy Hollow arsonist. This makes 6 attacks just today, with businesses left demolished and in flames. 8 are presumed dead, and 21 have been sent to St. Marcus Hospital in varying conditions. No suspects have been apprehended, and no evidence has been discovered, leading Sleepy Hollow PD and the surrounding departments to make an arrest. Residents have been instructed to stay indoors and report any incidents that could be related to the crimes to their local sheriff. Our team at K101.9 hopes you all had a safe Halloween and a fun and festive celebration. Up next, we're going to kick off the spooky night with some hits you may remember by... Crane switched off the radio. He shook his head and scoffed, speaking out loud to himself. What did I just say about Halloween? He snapped. It only promotes fear and trouble. Idiot kids, he groaned. He approached the third light as it blinked to yellow, then red, just as his opportunity to pass it closed. Come on, damn it! He stomped his foot impatiently on the mat beside the brake pedal. As Crane waited in silence, a black muscle car approached the light in the oncoming lane and eased to a stop. If he hadn't paid attention, he wouldn't have seen it. The intimidating 1969 Ford Mustang Mach 1 growled like a demon in the dark, with headlamps completely doused to blackness. Crane could barely make it out. The sharp reflections shining from its seamless paint job were its only noticeable details, other than the rumble of the engine. Ian grew irate. He flashed his high beams and shouted in vain, "Headlights! It's dark! Switch them on! You'll kill somebody!" The motorist didn't react. Exhaust wafted like hot breath from its chrome twin pipes. Crane honked his high-pitched horn and flashed his brights again. Nothing. Ian rolled down his window and threw his arm out into the cold air, flickering his lamps in the most intolerable fashion possible. "Turn on your headlights!" he screamed. Immediately, an earthquake struck his feet as the Mustang roared. A shockwave of vibration and violating sound passed harshly through his zero and through his bones. Crane jumped with startled fear and jittering trepidation. He gave up on communication, pulled his arm through the window, and writhed with contempt for the irresponsible driver. He eyed the front bumper. Only black. No white plate, no number, no identifying state-issued license. Ian's forehead wrinkled as he pulled his cell phone from his center console. Before work that morning, he had left the phone to charge in a car over the duration of his day. A long cord stemmed from the small device and plugged with an adapter into the round vehicle charge port. He illuminated the phone. The miniature screen displayed 2% power just before the interface and the buttons went dark. "Shit," Crane hissed. Apparently, his state-of-the-art hybrid didn't provide enough power to support a drip for a Nokia 3310. There would be no calls to the police from his vehicle tonight. The light blinked green, and the zero rolled forward. Fueled by indignation, Ian pushed his hand out of the open window and flashed a strong extended middle finger at the Mustang as he passed. He was shocked that he did so. He had never exhibited crude expressions of road rage to other drivers in the past, but this idiot, in his opinion, in the heat of the moment, deserved it. Anxiety gripped him as he rolled up the window and sped for the fourth and final light. It wouldn't come up for another minute. He closely watched the rearview mirror, exceeding the speed limit with a childlike fear. Ian's stomach turned to bile as he saw the reflection of the Mustang make an illegal U-turn. It followed him in the shadows of Maryview Parkway, headlights still dark. Crane ground his teeth and shivered with alarm. "Son of a bitch," he moaned. White lights darted across the hood of the classic car as it gained in distance and in speed. Ian floored the gas pedal, fleeing from the approaching horse, praying that the upcoming intersection remained green and open before the ramp to the highway. After a long, gradual curve, he spotted the light from a far distance. It was red for just a moment before brightening to an emerald green. The hybrid raced for the light as his knuckles paled against the dark gray of the steering wheel. "Come on, you bitch, stay green," he cried. No other vehicles made an appearance as he gunned for the light and the Mustang drew closer. Every hope in his soul went up in flames as the light sickened to yellow, then expired to red. His speed did not change. He contemplated running the light. Nobody would see him do it, and if the intersection was equipped with speed cameras, he'd gladly pay the fine. He kept his foot on the pedal as the internal debate raged on. Would he run it, or would he stop? He panicked at the thought of barreling through a crossway when thick foliage made it impossible to see any interjoining vehicles. His mind hectically pondered as the engine whirred. Just yards from the crimson light, Ian slammed on his brakes and squealed to a stop. The scent of hot rubber wafted as the bumper of his Zero halted just before the white line. He couldn't do it, not even if escaping death itself. Formidable rage shook his body and sent him into fits. "Fucking fuck, son of a bitch!" he screamed. His fist pounded the wheel and his foot slammed the rug. "You fucking pussy!" he bawled to himself. Crane glanced at the stuffed cat on the passenger seat. He eyed the message on its board and the concurring words written in black ink. He grabbed the toy, rolled down the window, and tossed it onto the street. Ian rolled up the glass and felt a hint of satisfaction. He may have obeyed the light, but he did break the law. That fact made him less of a pussy than he claimed, and others possibly assumed. His eyes sharply rose to the rearview mirror. The growling Mustang snuck up behind him and crept to a stop, just inches from his gunpowder bumper. His breathing began to quicken. For an entire minute, Crane was stuck between the grudging motorist and a bastard light that refused to change, even in spite of no crossing vehicles. He slapped his hands on the dashboard and seized with hostility. "Change, you fucker!" The light stayed red. The crossing bulb remained green. Out of angst, Ian recalled other nights when stuck at the final stoplight before Hollow Highway. To his memory, the longest he was ever made to wait was about a minute, maybe less. Tonight, it felt like an eternity. Suddenly, the ground shook again. The monstrous howl of the Leviathan engine knocked his mirror out of alignment and made his heart skip with a terrifying jolt. It happened again, then again. Crane twisted the mirror and attempted to see the driver. Only black, and reflections of white, overhead light. The crossing light turned yellow, then red. Ian gripped the wheel and prepared to charge. Green. He floored the gas and lurched forward. The little gray Zero flew up the ramp and onto the highway, speed at full and tires squealing. To no surprise, the Banshee followed. Beads of sweat formed on Ian's brow as he formulated a plan. He kept a close eye on the beast behind him. He was smart enough to know he'd never outrun a machine of that caliber, especially in a fuel-efficient hybrid with a 1.5-liter engine and an electrical counterpart. It was 52 miles to Sleepy Hollow. If the angry motorist continued to pursue him, he'd have to stop somewhere and call the police. There was no way he was leading this lunatic all the way to his home address. If the Mustang pulled in front of him, it may try to slam on its brakes and cause a collision. Ian was used to this method of road rage, being the driver of a Zero. Idiots in pickup trucks did it to him all the time. He'd have to avoid that trap as well. The plan came together and Crane calmed slightly. He'd let the asshole follow him for about 10 miles, then find an exit to a well-lit public truck stop. There were plenty of them along his route. Mile after mile, the monster remained focused on his tail. When Crane switched lanes, the Mustang did as well. When he slowed, it slowed. There was no getting away. As a desperate test, Ian exited the freeway, traveled the frontage road for a half mile, then re-entered Hollow Highway. The whole way, the beast followed closely. Closing in on 9 miles, Ian spotted a sign displaying gas prices for an upcoming stop. This would have to be it. He had to assume the driver would follow him all the way home if he allowed. Suddenly, an idea came to him. If he drove in the far right lane, he could pretend to ignore the upcoming exit. At the last second, he could abruptly take the exit before the Mustang had time to follow. Questions formed. Would the Zero be capable of making such a sudden turn at the speed he was going? How agile was the machine that pursued him? If the trick didn't work, he could always make it to the truck stop as planned. Crane merged into the right lane and prepared to jerk the wheel. Exit 241 came into view. Sweat streamed down his face and burned his eyes. He ground his teeth down to nubs as the ramp approached. At the very last moment, and feet before the yellow barrels of the highway split, Ian yanked the wheel and took the exit. He felt a sudden lift as his right side tires jumped from the pavement and the momentary horror of being airborne. His tires struck the street and his steering swiveled. Crane corrected his aim, steadied the car, and looked to the mirror. No Mustang, no reflections, no beast. With no time to celebrate, he sped into the truck stop lot, pulled close to the entrance, and threw the hybrid into park. He didn't bother parking in a space. Close to the building was all he needed. Ian pushed open the door and stepped out into the cold. He stared intensely at the highway and the frontage. Still nothing. No headlights, no engine, no roar. The trick had worked. He grinned to himself. "I got you, you bastard," he muttered. He closed the door, locked the Zero, and entered the gas station. The lights were blinding, and the stop wasn't populated with as many bodies as he had hoped. It didn't matter. They would have a phone, and that's all he cared about. He approached a teenage kid behind a glass counter. He laughed from a tall stool against a display of cigarettes and chewing tobacco. He was on the phone. He chatted with a friend and discussed something idiotic under the beat of pop songs pumping through the overhead speakers. "I need to use your phone," Ian demanded. The kid shot him a look of irritation. "Fuck you, man," he barked. He turned his shoulder and continued to talk. Crane grew tense. Every memory of teenage backtalk, defiance, and flat-out insult echoed in his head from instances in his classroom and within school grounds. He dreamed of the day he would finally be able to say exactly what he meant to one of the little pricks, without fear of getting fired or banned from teaching forever. Tonight, in this gas station, and miles from Cindervale High, the gloves could come off. Ian withheld nothing. "You entitled little shit. Give me the fucking phone or I'll ram it up your spoiled, ungrateful photocopy of your narcissistic parents' ass," he thundered. The teen didn't blink an eye. He stood, took the phone into a back room, and closed the door. Crane heard the door lock from the inside, and the conversation go on. "I'm calling the cops," he screamed at the door. He angrily slammed the counter with his fist. "Shit," he hissed. He had no idea what to do next. Ian stepped to the windows and peered through the glass. Still no Mustang, nor any sign of an approaching customer with a cell phone. His eyes wandered the details of the lot as he thought. Abruptly, a disturbing sight met his eyes. Beneath his parked car, Crane noticed a dark puddle. The black mass reflected the light of the neon sign above and appeared fresh. Concerned, he threw open the door and stood beside his vehicle. He crouched, touched his fingers to the puddle, and smelled the substance. Ian shivered as the foul scent of gasoline pierced his senses. He stood and observed the surrounding pavement. A steady drip of petroleum, like tiny footprints, led away from the Zero and through the lot where he had entered. His tank was leaking gas. All Ian could think about was the stupid kid in his class who mentioned gas leak issues with the mini hybrid Zero, and the electrical issues that presumably resulted in his phone failing to charge. He shook with frustration and wrath. "You gotta be kidding me," he groaned. A new plan formulated. He ran into the store, shoplifted a pack of gum, and returned to his car. Ian shoved several pieces in his mouth and began to chew. He laid on the ground, squinted through the darkness, and attempted to pinpoint where the leak was coming from. If he found a crack or a breach, he could temporarily seal it with the gum and get home. If only he had a flashlight. He cursed at himself for not being more prepared. Fumbling with possible solutions, he remembered the keychain and slapped the hip of his pants. The pumpkin LED he withheld from Kyle was still at his disposal. He plucked it from his pocket, squeezed the soft rubber, and cast light onto his undercarriage. The steady drip was streaming along a shaft from an unknown source, deep behind parts he had never seen before and did not know the purpose of. He wasn't a mechanic, nor did he know anything about cars. If he did, he'd probably be making far more than a history teacher's salary. He grunted with irritation. Sickeningly, a familiar and gut-wrenching roar erupted from a distance. Trembling with dark surprise, Ian jumped to his feet and looked to the sound. To his horror, the Mustang was slowly passing the truck stop along the frontage road. It didn't enter the lot, but somehow Crane knew it could see him. As if teasing, the demonic horse trotted by the station and revved its powerful engine, taunting him and terrifying him. Ian darted into the gas station, leapt over the counter, and began banging on the backroom door, screaming at the ignorant clerk. He took a fire extinguisher off the wall and attempted to break the door down, hammering at it with the 15-pound piece of metallic hardware. Worst case, the kid would call the police. Exactly what Ian wanted. Wail after wail, he struck the extinguisher against the solid door without a break, without a crack, and without a budge. 30 seconds of havoc. Crane dropped the canister to the floor, heaving with exhaustion. His arms ached, and his lungs burned from screaming. Slowly, he recovered from the frenzied outburst. No voices from behind the door met his ears. Not a sound, not a whisper. Faintly, the hint of a motor hummed. It was far off, quiet, but prominent. Steadily, it grew louder. Ian ran to the windows. He couldn't see the car. He could only hear it. As the thunder grew, the glass began to vibrate, and the floor quaked below his feet. After seconds, the V8 engine became deafening. It drowned out the music and shook products off their shelves. All at once, the demon was directly on top of the truck stop. In one massive explosion, the black '69 Mustang Mach 1 smashed through the station and sent brick, mortar, and drywall flying into ribbons and debris. Rebar, concrete, and aluminum soared as the drop ceiling collapsed and the light fixtures fell. The power went black, yellow dust plumed, and the back room was wiped completely out of existence. The teenage clerk went right along with it. All at once, quiet. Ian stirred from under a pile of ceiling tiles and shelves. He pushed a display of lewd bumper stickers and trucker hats away from his chest and rose to his quivering feet. His clothes were white with chalky dust. He coughed, patted the clouds from his garments, and beheld the destruction. 2 massive holes turned the station into a drive-through in the dark glow of the parking lot lamps. He couldn't hear the Mustang. He assumed the kid was dead. The phone was God knew where, in the rubble of brick and beams. Crane ran through the station's front door, past his car, and rounded the building's corner. The exit hole was the size of a semi-truck. There was no way the driver was still alive. Not after a crash like that. He looked to the pavement. Ferocious tire marks exited the hole, ran across the lot, and disappeared into the woods. No wrecked Mustang, no dead driver. Just irrefutable evidence that the demon had passed directly through the building and vanished into the forest, unscathed and unhindered. For the first time in Ian's life, he was at a loss for words and answers. Everything he thought he had understood came into question. Logic, reason, and science collapsed like the ceiling in the truck stop, leaving him speechless, dumbfounded, and confused. No new plan formed in his head, just the urge to get in his car, speed home, and wake up in bed tomorrow, leaving tonight as nothing but a terrible memory. Head throbbing, he approached his car. A thick layer of dust covered the Zero and clouded the windshield. He eyed the puddle. It hadn't grown since his earlier inspection, but he was sure gas still leaked from his tank. He opened his door, dropped into his seat, and turned the key. The hybrid started without a struggle. Thank God, he thought. He sighed with relief as the engine chugged. For minutes now, Crane heard no roar of the Mustang's V8. He rested his head against the wheel and closed his eyes. Maybe it was done. Maybe it claimed a life and went on its way. Maybe this was all a nightmare. For all he knew, the car was a ghost. He'd take any explanation at this point. He was so tired. His eyes were heavy. He just wanted to sleep. So he did just that. Ian woke. He peeled his head off the steering wheel and yawned. His skull burned with pain. Dark still showed through the dust-covered glass. It was still night. His engine was running. For a second, He panicked. He looked at his gas gauge. Half a tank. The panic settled. He checked the digital time on his dashboard. It was 11:32. He had slept for roughly an hour. The disgruntled motorist had to have moved on. Still no V8, no demon roar, no more earthquakes. The monster was gone. To further distance himself from the nightmare, Ian turned on the radio. The oldie station was still tuned on. The uplifting but dark hymn of Seasons in the Sun by Terry Jacks had just begun. He lazily nodded along to the music as he buckled his seatbelt and activated the windshield wipers. The yellow dust was stripped away from the glass. Clarity showed through the front windshield and the rear. There it was, glaring in the reflection of his mirror. Terry Jacks sang his haunting hit about the inescapable certainty of human mortality as the Mustang revved its overpowered engine just yards behind Ian's tail. The classic car didn't display a single scratch nor a dent from its destruction of the truck stop. It appeared to have risen from the dead, unblemished and uninhibited, back for more. Stunned by panic, Ian shifted the car into drive. The hybrid's engine died. His headlights and the melodic song remained on. He went into a fury of hysteria as he turned the key again and again, trembling with horror and shrieking like a pussy. To Crane's terrible surprise, the stuffed cat holding the concurring message rested on his dashboard and smiled happily. The sudden observation only elevated his delirium. The ghost must have collected it from Maryview Parkway and placed it in his car as he slept. Ian wept with fear. Through his rearview mirror, an orange light ignited behind the Mustang's black windshield. Eyes glazed and hands vibrating, Ian watched the motorist roll down his driver's side window and extend a full-sized, candle-lit jack-o'-lantern outward through the open window and in clear visibility of Ian's view. The driver's arm was covered in the leather sleeve of a biker jacket. A black driving glove tightly covered his hand. The twisted, horrific face of the jack-o'-lantern smiled menacingly for 2 long seconds before the large pumpkin engulfed completely into flames. Fully on fire, the face seemed to widen, snicker, even laugh. The motorist tipped his hand and dropped the flaming pumpkin. It landed directly onto the small trail of gasoline droplets, leading straight to Ian's leaking gas tank. Drool splashed from Ian's mouth as he screamed. He twisted the key again and again, praying to an outdated and scientifically implausible God that the engine would finally start and his life would be spared. On the pavement, a hungry feasting line of flames followed the spilled gas and made its sprint from the shattered jack-o'-lantern to the undercarriage of Crane's hybrid. With one last turn, Ian screamed, "Start, you electric piece of pussy shit!" The Zero's engine came to life. Ian shifted into drive, hammered down the gas pedal, and sped away from the licking flames. Tires screaming, he left the lot. He took the ramp and returned to the looming blackness of Hollow Highway. The ghost followed. In the mirror, Crane witnessed the truck stop explode into a fireball of orange hellfire. Plumes of smoke and burning cinders rose into the moon-drenched Halloween sky. 10 miles traveled and close to home. The Mustang was directly on his ass. A harsh beep sounded from his dashboard. Ian observed the indicators. The battery light, the check engine light, and the flashing fuel icon reflected in his desperate eyes. The radio played Dead Man's Party by Oingo Boingo as he sped down the freeway. He didn't bother turning it off. He had bigger problems and had to come up with a plan fast. Or he'd run out of gas and die on the highway. He approached an early exit for Sleepy Hollow and Sickle Glen Forest Preserve. With no time left, he took it. Crane bolted straight through the red stoplight, and down a winding path, leading into the preserve. Turn after turn, Ian took the most confusing route on the gravel path possible. The Mustang's traction would be useless on loose stone. It would lose speed and its advantage. After 6 turns, 6 bends, and 6 intersections, the beast was no longer visible. Crane took a sharp right at a sign marked Headless Horseman Overpass and raced through the gravel. Ahead, a covered bridge sat high above a winding stream. That would have to be it, he thought. A hiding place. To pray, hope, and wish. The Zero ducked under the roof of the wooden bridge and slid to a stop. Ian doused the lights, killed the engine, and silenced the radio. Quiet now. Only the sounds of the stream, the pleasing hum of gentle water, chirping crickets, and croaking frogs. Crane wrapped his arms around his body and listened, body shaking and breaths frantic. He calmed and reordered his thoughts, listening for the sound of the V8 monster. Nothing. Nothing but frogs. Ian took the next several minutes to rethink his attitude. The attitude toward life that led him into hiding in a covered bridge in the middle of the night from an outdated, immortal 1969 muscle car he indirectly proclaimed in the past to be obsolete, antiquated, and useless. He recalled every lecture he gave, the messages he drilled into his students, and every opportunity for fun he passed by, in favor of work and keeping far ahead of his colleagues to wallow in pride and self-commendation. He should have gone to parties. He should have kept a balance between pleasure and productivity. He should have called Kate. Regret twisted in his gut as the past burned him alive with lamenting memories. The lesson came too late. Crane heard the V8 engine for only a moment before the Zero was smashed to ribbons. His body was sent flying. The windshield decapitated him from the center of his neck, and his head scraped to a stop along the harsh, freezing gravel of the preserve. Shattered glass, the stuffed cat, and his pumpkin keychain rested beside his open mouth and lifeless eyes. In the last 15 seconds of Ian's life, as his brain was still active, 2 observations became immaculately clear. 1, new didn't always mean the best. And 2, you can absolutely feel the pain of crushed testicles when the head is severed completely from the body. This was a reading of Headless Horsepower, The Ghost of Hollow Highway. Written and narrated by Mark Steven Nordlund. Copyright 2025, Mark Steven Nordlund. All rights reserved. A Boohouse Books book. BoohouseBooks.com.